In the thin pre-dawn air over the western Pacific, two dark shapes close in on each other at 30,000 feet. One is American, the other Chinese. Both are bristling with missiles, yet it's not their weapons that make them feared. It's the silence. No radio calls, no radar pings, just an eerie quiet as each jet's computers wage invisible war. In modern air combat, the first to see is the first to destroy. But what if neither can see at all? The pilots peer at screens dancing with ghosts, each hunting for an enemy that's busy blinding them. This is the battle of the electronic titans, the United States F-15EX, or F-15EX, and China's J-16D, or J-16D, squaring off in a duel where victory will go to the jet that turns the other into a flying blind man first. Both aircraft were born from the lessons of previous wars and the fears of wars yet to come. On one side, the F-15EX is the newest descendant of a legendary American fighter lineage. Its bloodline traces back to the original F-15 Eagles that once ruled the skies of the Cold War. But even legends age. By the late 2010s, the United States Air Force's old F-15 Charlie models were crumbling. One literally broke apart in flight, spurring calls for a replacement. The answer was as audacious as it was ironic: build a brand new version of the F-15, a design first flown in 1972, and stuff it with technology from 2025. The result was the F-15EX, a fourth-generation plus fighter that carries the soul of an eagle but the brains of a much younger predator. It was approved in 2019 over some objections. Critics sneered that it wasn't stealthy, calling it a Cold War relic, yet Congress pushed it through as an insurance policy. The logic was simple. Stealth jets like the F-35 and F-22 are precious and few, so a rugged workhorse was needed to haul missiles and keep watch when stealth isn't required. Thus, the Eagle de Sioux took to the skies, inheriting decades of engineering lessons and ready to prove that even an old frame can learn new tricks. The J-16D, on the other side of this matchup, emerged from a very different saga. Its lineage is Soviet, a descendant of the Sukhoi flanker family that China imported and then improved. The base J-16 started as a Chinese remix of the Su-30 MKK, a big twin-engine fighter bomber. But Chinese engineers weren't content to copy. They refined. They gave the J-16 a modern AESA radar, active electronically scanned array, better composites, and Chinese-made WS-10 engines. It became one of the most capable non-stealth fighters in Asia, a hidden dragon, as its nickname Qianlong implies. Yet in warfare, brute force alone wasn't enough. The People's Liberation Army Air Force looked at how the United States employed electronic attack planes like the EA-18G Growler and realized it needed a dragon that could breathe electronic fire. So around 2010, work began on a specialized variant, the J-16D, purpose-built for electronic warfare and suppression of enemy air defenses, or SEAD. Where the F-15EX is an evolution, the J-16D is almost a mutation. A J-16 modified to neutralize not just enemy planes, but the unseen emitters that guide them. Fittingly, the two jets reflect two philosophies of modern air combat. The F-15EX carries a simple ethos: overwhelm the enemy with superior firepower and information. It's a big fighter that behaves like a quarterback, gathering data, sharing it with teammates, and carrying enough weapons to tackle any target that pops up. Boeing proudly notes the Eagle de Sioux can haul 12 air-to-air missiles under its wings in standard configuration and possibly up to 22 with special racks. That's an astounding arsenal, 29,000 pounds of ordnance in total, more than some World War II bombers. It can even carry new hypersonic missiles nearly 7 meters long, essentially flying around with a rocket booster strapped beneath its belly. To guide all this fury, the F-15EX relies on cutting-edge sensors and battle management systems. Its AN/APG-82 version 1 AESA radar, derived from the APG-63 series, peers hundreds of kilometers out, painting targets with microwaves without ever tipping off an enemy until it's too late. Deep in the jet's nose, this radar's modules scan and focus energy in microseconds, able to track multiple aircraft or map ground targets in high resolution simultaneously. If the radar somehow misses something, a Legion pod hanging under the chin provides infrared search and track, or IRST, a passive thermal eye that can spot the heat of enemy stealth aircraft or stealthy cruise missiles at distance. And tying it all together is a honeycomb of computers. A new Advanced Display Core Processor, or ADCP version 2, capable of 87 billion operations a second, and an open mission systems architecture that lets the Eagle II ingest and share data like a flying supercomputer. Across the imaginary sky, the J-16 Delta embodies a different approach. Deny the enemy any advantage before the shooting starts. It's not just armed with missiles, though it carries those too. Its primary weapons are the myriad antennas and pods jutting from its gray fuselage. The D in J-16 Delta stands for electronic attack, and the design sacrifices much to make room for that mission. The standard J-16's infrared search and trackball, normally perched in front of the canopy, is gone, as is the 30mm cannon in the nose. In their place, the J-16 Delta crams in additional electronic receivers and computing power. This jet's nose houses what analysts suspect is a new AESA radar, hinted by a reshaped radome and stated outright by its designers at Airshow China. Dozens of antennas stud the airframe like quills on a porcupine, giving 360-degree coverage to sniff out radar emissions and radio signals. And most visibly, the J-16 Delta carries an array of external jamming pods. Two of them ride on its wingtips, sleek and ominous, reminiscent of the ALQ-218 pods on the United States Growler. At the 2021 Zhuhai Air Show, where the J-16 Delta was unveiled, it was shown with no fewer than 4 additional EW pods under its wings and air inlets. Each pod likely serves a specialized purpose. Perhaps one jams high-frequency fire control radars, another blinds lower-frequency search radars, and yet another scrambles communication networks. Chinese sources indicate these are part of the new KZ-900 series of jamming systems, cutting-edge emitters powerful enough to cripple an enemy's sensors or data links mid-flight. In essence, the J-16 Delta trades brute force weaponry for the ability to sculpt the electromagnetic battlefield itself. It is the spear tip of China's strategy to fight under informatized conditions, to seize control of the information sphere so that enemy forces cannot see, communicate, or coordinate. It sounds like science fiction, airplanes trying to blind each other with invisible energy beams. But this is exactly what modern air combat is becoming. In stark contrast to the Top Gun dogfights of the past, a clash between an F-15EX and a J-16 Delta would largely be decided by who can cripple whose electronics first. The F-15EX, for its part, comes equipped with the latest electronic warfare defensive suite the United States has fielded, the AN/ALQ-250EPAWSS, which stands for Eagle Passive Active Warning Survivability System. Tucked inside the Eagle's fuselage and wingtips are antennas and sensors that serve as its ears and tail, constantly scanning for any radar that's looking its way. The moment EPAWSS detects an incoming threat, say the telltale pulse of a targeting radar or the smoky trail of a heat-seeking missile, it springs into action. In microseconds, it identifies the type of threat and deploys countermeasures. Maybe a focused radio frequency jamming burst to confuse the radar, or decoy flares and chaff to seduce an incoming missile off course. Unlike older jamming systems that were analog and manual, EPAWSS is fully digital and even cognitive, meaning it can adapt on the fly to new enemy signals not previously seen, formulating jamming techniques in real time. This smart electronic brain was long in development. It took over a decade to perfect, but now it's finally operational on United States Eagles, dramatically boosting their survivability in hostile skies. BAE Systems, the developer, boasts that EPAWSS allows the F-15 to deny, degrade, and disrupt surface and airborne threats in dense signal environments. In other words, the F-15EX can do a bit of what the J-16 Delta does. It can offensively jam enemy radars, but primarily in self-defense, to carve a protective bubble around itself and any wingman nearby. If EPAWSS is a shield of electric smoke around the F-15EX, the J-16 Delta is a sword of electromagnetic steel aimed at the enemy's heart. The Chinese aircraft's mission is offensive, to take down the networks that hold together modern air warfare. According to China's own state media, the J-16 Delta is indispensable because it integrates reconnaissance, offensive, and defensive electronic warfare capabilities to counter everything from early warning radars to communications and even the strike components of enemy systems. That means in a conflict, J-16 Deltas would be hunting the radar eyes of enemy warships and SAM batteries, jamming the data links that connect fighter to fighter, and perhaps even confusing the guidance systems of inbound missiles. With its multiple pods, a J-16 Delta could simultaneously engage several bands of the spectrum, for example, pumping out powerful noise in the C-band or X-band to blind fire control radars, while also broadcasting deceptive fake signals in the S-band to fool search radars. Another pod might listen for enemy radio communications or emitters, feeding that intel to the J-16 Delta's onboard computers for analysis. And then there's the possibility of cyber warfare. Some modern jammers can do more than just jam. They can inject malicious code into radar networks through their waveforms. It's whispered that the J-16 Delta systems might eventually attempt such feats, essentially hacking enemy defenses from the air by exploiting weaknesses in how their radar and control systems communicate. It's a capability still largely theoretical, but even the hint of it is enough to raise eyebrows in Pentagon briefing rooms. A Chinese J-16 Delta in flight, identifiable by its twin-seat cockpit and the electronic warfare pods on its wingtips, small white housings at the tips. This electronic dragon carries no gun. Instead, it wields invisible weapons to blind and deceive adversaries. It specializes in paralyzing enemy sensors from afar. The men and women flying these jets are keenly aware that they are entering a new kind of fight. Imagine an F-15EX pilot and a J-16 Delta crew. The J-16 Delta seats two, pilot and electronic warfare officer, approaching the same battle space, both knowing the other is out there. The F-15EX pilot has an AWACS aircraft, hundreds of miles behind him, feeding targets to his displays. A picture of enemy airspace is data linked into his cockpit. AWACS stands for Airborne Warning and Control System. On that picture, there's an ominous blotch of static where a Chinese jammer is working. That's the first sign the enemy is near. Not a radar contact, but a hole where no information returns. The J-16 Delta has likely detected the American first. Its long-range sensors picked up the distinctive electromagnetic noise of AWACS and fighter radars from afar. In response, the Chinese crew toggles on their jammers one by one. Instantly, the American AWACS's screen lights up with interference, the telltale electronic fog of jamming across multiple frequencies. The F-15 Eagle X's own radar starts to act erratic, contacts flickering in and out as noise floors rise. But the Eagle de Secours was built for this moment. The F-15 Eagle X's EPA-WSS begins fine-tuning filters to cut through jamming. The pilot switches tactics. If the radar is untrustworthy, he'll use his infrared search and track or rely on off-board targeting data shared via encrypted Link 16 network, though that too could be jammed by the J-16 Delta's onslaught. For a brief moment, both jets are effectively blind, their long-range eyes dazzled by noise. The outcome may hinge on who adapts faster or whose support infrastructure holds out. This theoretical engagement shows how tense and uncertain a modern air clash can be. It might start with blips and noise long before missiles fly. Perhaps the J-16 Delta pair is escorting a swarm of Chinese bombers or cruise missiles, and it is their job to make sure ground-based Patriot batteries and Aegis cruisers cannot lock onto those incoming threats. Perhaps the F-15 Eagle X is part of a U.S./Japanese rapid reaction force scrambling to protect an allied asset, say a United States carrier group in the Pacific or the island of Guam, by destroying those bombers or missiles before they get within range. In such a scenario, the J-16 Deltas would concentrate their jamming at the radars of the defending fighters and ships. The American pilots would feel a knot in their stomachs as their threat warning receivers light up with the angry buzz that means someone is trying to burn your eyes out. They know that somewhere out ahead, likely still beyond visual range, are Chinese fighters designed to make them deaf, dumb, and blind. For the J-16 Delta crews, the pressure is just as intense. Their jet is an invaluable but vulnerable asset. In fact, Western analysts believe the first thing the United States would do in a shooting war is target the J-16 Deltas for elimination. These lumbering electronic attackers, not being stealthy, would be priority prey for American long-range missiles the moment they came within range. So the Chinese EW crews must perform a high-wire act, get close enough to do their job, but not so close that an F-15 Eagle X or F-35 gets a clean shot. Perhaps they use standoff distance, staying behind the cover of friendly fighters and even trying to spoof the American AIM-120 missiles once they detect a launch. The game of cat and mouse is frenetic. Jamming pods power up and angle towards threats. Missiles are fired and then go dumb in flight as their seekers encounter confusing false targets, only to reacquire when jamming pauses for a split second. It's a deadly dance, all taking place at several times the speed of sound, under the shadow of a potential wider war. An F-15 Eagle X on the ramp during testing, loaded with air-to-air missiles under its wing. The Eagle II carries an arsenal of advanced weaponry and a suite of sensors. Note the sensor pods on its intake and underbelly. All coordinated by one of the most sophisticated electronic warfare systems ever put in a fighter. This aircraft exemplifies the fusion of a classic airframe with new generation technology to dominate in both firepower and information warfare. In raw performance, these two titans are fairly evenly matched, at least on paper. The F-15 Eagle X inherits the superb kinematics of the Eagle family. Twin General Electric F-110-GE-129 engines giving over 29,000 pounds of thrust each, allowing Mach 2.5 speed and an initial climb rate that can leave most fighters in the dust. Its service ceiling tops 60,000 feet. The J-16 Delta, powered by Chinese WS-10B engines of roughly similar thrust class, can likely reach about Mach 2.0 plus and similarly lofty altitudes. Flanker airframes are known for high energy performance. The J-16 Delta's aerodynamic lineage, with large leading-edge extensions and powerful control surfaces, gives it agility on par with its American rival, and being a two-seater, it can put a weapons officer in the back seat to manage its complex electronic warfare tasks. The F-15EX, interestingly, is also usually flown with 2 crew in testing, a pilot and a weapons systems officer, though it can be operated by a single pilot if needed. When it comes to range, both are designed to go the distance. The J-16 was built as a strike fighter to escort bombers on long raids, so the Delta variant has plenty of fuel and even aerial refueling capability. The F-15EX similarly boasts a combat radius over 1,100 miles without refuel. It's intended to fly long defensive CAPs, or combat air patrols, or carry heavy payloads across oceans if necessary. Neither aircraft is stealthy in the sense the F-35 or J-20 are. They light up on each other's radar screens like big Christmas trees given their size, though both have likely applied some radar-absorbent coatings or paints to modestly shrink their signatures. This means if one can get a radar beam on the other, detection is almost assured at long range, unless, of course, jamming gets in the way. That is why an engagement between them would hinge on electronic warfare and countermeasures, not on who can pull the most Gs in a tight turn. In a close-range dogfight, one could imagine the F-15EX and J-16 Delta evenly matched in thrust and weight, swirling amid the clouds like 2 knife fighters whose blades are equal. But modern doctrine would rarely let them get that close. One or the other would be neutralized, literally or metaphorically, before that ever happens. Despite the similarities in their raw stats, each jet is optimized for a distinct role within its nation's game plan. The F-15EX is the United States' new workhorse and bomb truck. It is being fielded to replace older F-15 Charlie/Delta air superiority fighters and to complement F-35 stealth fighters in roles where stealth isn't crucial. The United States Air Force intends to station Eagle 2s in places like Okinawa, replacing F-15 Charlies at Kadena Air Base, and with Air National Guard squadrons protecting the homeland. In a major war, F-35s and F-22s, with their invisibility to radar, would likely spearhead the first wave of attacks, neutralizing the most dangerous enemy air defenses. But after that day 1 punch, the F-15EXs would surge in on day 2 or 3, carrying a far larger payload of missiles and bombs to keep up the pressure once the enemy's radar coverage has thinned. The Eagle II's ability to carry outsized weapons also gives it niche missions. For instance, it could lug standoff anti-ship missiles to augment the Navy, or even loft future hypersonic boost glide weapons to hit targets hundreds of miles away. In essence, the F-15EX is America's heavyweight slugger, not as fancy on its feet as an F-35, but capable of throwing a knockout punch with a 2,000-pound bunker buster or by volleying a dozen AMRAAMs at a swarm of enemy fighters. Its avionics keep it relevant. It links with stealth fighters to act as their armed escort. The Pentagon envisions F-15EXs serving as missile magazines guided by stealthy F-35s acting as forward sensors. And crucially, the F-15EX can defend itself in the electromagnetic realm better than any fourth-generation jet before it, thanks to EPAWSS. Still, the Eagle II is not invincible. It relies on its onboard tricks and whatever cover-friendly EW assets provide. The Air Force knows it must not throw F-15EXs against top-tier integrated air defenses without support. They are powerful, but not sneaky. To that end, F-15EX units will train closely with growlers or other jamming support in joint operations, ensuring they don't blunder into an electronic ambush alone. China's J-16 Delta, by contrast, is more akin to a specialized surgeon's scalpel in the People's Liberation Army's toolkit. It's not a mass-market fighter. As of 2024, only a small number, perhaps a regiment's worth, around a dozen, of J-16 Deltas are in service, compared to hundreds of regular J-16s. The People's Liberation Army Air Force treats them as high-value force multipliers. In any campaign, especially one like a Taiwan invasion scenario, J-16 Deltas would be first in, last out, alongside other assets to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum. They might fly in concert with J-20 stealth fighters. The J-20s sneak close to targets without alerting radars, while the J-16 Deltas from further back blast those radars with noise. A 1-2 combination of stealth and smackdown that could paralyze an adversary's early warning capacity. The J-16 Delta is also designed to work in conjunction with China's growing fleet of reconnaissance planes and drones, creating an electronic warfare umbrella for Chinese strike forces. Wang Yanan, a Chinese aerospace expert, described how a J-16 Delta can even enhance the stealth of less stealthy aircraft by jamming enemy radar, effectively cloaking them in electronic shadows. People's Liberation Army strategists have studied United States successes in wars like Iraq, 1991 and 2003, where American EA-6B and EA-18G jamming crippled Iraqi defenses. They clearly intend to have that ability themselves. So the J-16 Delta fills a role that previously was a glaring gap for China, an airborne electronic attacker to escort raids and strike groups. Without it, Chinese bombers and fighters would be far more exposed to modern networked air defenses. With it, China can attempt the kind of layered penetration that United States forces have long employed. Fighters under cover of jamming with long-range anti-radiation missiles, or ARM, to destroy SAM sites. In fact, the J-16 Delta is expected to carry such ARMs itself, likely the YJ-91 or newer missiles akin to the United States HARM. Launching a high-speed anti-radar missile while simultaneously flooding the radar with jamming is a classic SEAD tactic. Either the radar shuts down to avoid the ARM and is then useless, or it stays on and gets neutralized. Either outcome is a win for the jammer. This cat-and-mouse electronic war between the F-15EX and J-16 Delta doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's part of a bigger picture that military planners call the combat cloud, or the multi-domain battle. Each jet is a node in a vast web. The F-15EX is linked to satellites overhead, to ground command centers, to other fighters and AWACS planes, all sharing data. The J-16 Delta similarly is integrated into the People's Liberation Army's networks, likely linked to KJ-500 AWACS early warning planes and naval ships below. The side that can sever the links holding the other's network together gains a massive edge. That might be the ultimate goal of the J-16 Delta, not just to save its own skin or its wingmans, but to blind the entire enemy force at the critical moment. For instance, one nightmare scenario for the United States Navy is a J-16 Delta getting within range to jam the powerful radars of an Aegis cruiser or the E-2D Hawkeye eyes of a carrier strike group. If that happened, suddenly the information guiding United States missiles and interceptors would be compromised. Conversely, the nightmare for China would be an F-15EX surviving long enough to launch a volley of long-range AIM-120D or AIM-260 missiles at the support assets China relies on, like their KJ-500 AWACS or high-value J-16 Delta itself. In an air battle, everyone's hunting the other side's force multipliers, jammers, tankers, radar planes. It's a deadly irony that the J-16 Delta, tasked to neutralize enemy eyes, has a big bullseye painted on it in American war plans. The F-15EX, armed to the teeth, would love nothing more than to lob a missile at a J-16 Delta from 100 miles away and eliminate that threat early. So the J-16 Delta would likely be shielded by friendly fighters, maybe J-11s or J-10s, forming a protective screen. we start to see the outline of a broader conflict scenario. Mixed formations of stealth and non-stealth jets, electronic attackers in the back, air superiority fighters in front, all maneuvering for advantage, not just in physical space, but in the electromagnetic spectrum as well. As the metaphorical dust settles on any given encounter between these platforms, one thing is clear: their duel is emblematic of a new era. There's a saying now making rounds in pilot-ready rooms: missiles destroy planes, but electrons destroy wars. It reflects the understanding that no matter how many missiles you carry, be it 8 or 22, if you can't get a targeting lock or your enemy's countermeasures send those missiles astray, brute force means nothing. Both the F-15EX and J-16 Delta represent a response to that truth. They are drenched in electronics, from radar-absorbent coatings to advanced jammers, precisely because a direct head-to-head shootout is no longer a guaranteed path to victory. The old eagle versus flanker debates centered on thrust, wing loading, turn rates. The new debates sound more like tech brochures: who has more processing power, whose algorithms adapt faster under jamming, which radar has better low probability of intercept modes to sneak up on the other. The United States has publicly fretted that China's investments in these areas are eroding the West's lead. In 2023, the United States Air Force Secretary himself warned that Beijing is rapidly advancing electronic warfare and other destroy chain capabilities, saying, "We are out of time in keeping ahead." It was an unusually candid admission. The race in electronic warfare is close, and the outcome could decide any future conflict before it even begins. And so we end not with a pronouncement of which jet wins, the F-15EX or the J-16 Delta, but with a realization: modern air combat may not grant any side an easy win at all. If the Eagle II and the Electronic Dragon ever meet in anger, the battle will be determined by preparation, teamwork, and a little luck. Perhaps an F-15EX gets vector cues from a stealth F-35 and silently lobs a beyond visual range missile that destroys the unsuspecting J-16 Delta before it can react. Or perhaps the J-16 Delta, lurking behind a screen of decoys and drones, manages to jam and slip away, denying the Americans their neutralization and leaving them groping in sensor darkness at the worst possible time. In either case, it won't be a duel of aces in a clear blue sky, but a chess match in the haze of electronic war. Fast, unforgiving, and likely decided by who makes the first mistake. The true victor, many analysts note, will be the side that better integrates these wonder jets into a coherent fighting system. A lone F-15EX or a lone J-16 Delta is a big, formidable beast, but it's also a single point of failure. Paired with the right allies, be it F-35s or J-20s, AWACS, or drones, they become exponentially more dangerous. In the age of electronic warfare, the most decisive weapon isn't a missile or a cannon shell. It's information and the ability to take it away from the enemy. Dogfights aren't fought with guns and heat seekers now. They're fought with invisible waves that decide who lives and who vanishes first.